Hello everyone, this is ponderonweather. In this update, we've got powerful storms packing intense winds along with very large hail and potentially some tornadoes as tropical storm Fiona looks to become a hurricane, if not a major hurricane, as we'll walk you through the next 7 days. Welcome back everyone, how's it going? This is your morning update. I appreciate all my followers and my new followers out there. If you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns on North America and the tropics, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to this morning. Yesterday, we had a massive storm that impacted parts of Alaska, western Alaska there. It dropped down to a 937 millibar low pressure. This was the remnants of a Pacific typhoon that impacted that area with 54-foot waves offshore, 18-foot storm surge, life-threatening flash flooding, and that encompassed it. That same storm hit over the United States. That would include about 13 states. That shows you how massive this storm was. And that storm is actually going to be buckling the jet stream today, so it's going to be winding down up there in Alaska, but now it's all that same energy is going to be pulled southward and going to be impacting parts of California with this low pressure center. These powerful winds are going to be racing across, and that is going to set the stage for new development over parts of the upper Midwest with some stronger thunderstorms later on this afternoon. In fact, we talked about this yesterday. We talked about that we were going to upgrade this to an enhanced risk, and they did in fact upgrade this to an enhanced risk for severe storms. So yes, later on today, I'm thinking about 8 o'clock in the early evening time frame, headed into the overnight, we could be looking at some supercell thunderstorms breaking out in parts of Iowa, parts of Illinois, as well as Indiana, parts of Missouri here. If you live in those areas, you need to be on high alert for some high impact storms later on this afternoon into the overnight hours. So the main concern with these storms in these areas in places like Des Moines and to Cedar Rapids, going into Peoria, back into Davenport, Iowa City, those areas into Springfield are going to be on high alert. When you're talking this hatched risk, this is a hatched risk, guys, that's indicative of 2-inch in diameter hailstones falling from the sky. That is your golf ball size hail. That is your tennis ball size hail. That's going to do a lot of damage to vehicles if they are left outside. So again, the main time frame, I would say literally about 8 o'clock tonight, going about 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning. That window, you need to be on high alert for all three modes of severe weather, with those damaging winds upwards to 65 plus miles an hour, along with that 2-inch diameter hail. That doesn't mean everybody gets it. About 10% will get it, but those that do get it, it could do a lot of damage to their vehicles, if not some of their houses and their roofs as well, with that capability of producing some of those larger hailstones that fall out of the sky. So like I mentioned, the atmosphere is going to be pretty powerful with that low pressure center coming across. So it should start to impact parts of California today with some heavier rains and some much needed rain for those areas. But are also going to be packing some stronger wind gust in its wake. So you could be looking at some higher wind gusts in portions of central and northern California, back in Nevada, back into Utah portions, as well as into Colorado here, going into Kansas, but really start to intensify once we get into Missouri, especially into Illinois, heading into Indiana later on tonight into the overnight hours. And some isolated spots upwards, 65, 75, 80, if not maxing out possibly at 90 miles an hour at some of these locations within this zone. So definitely be on high alert for some pretty intense winds and batten down the hatches later on tonight. And the Cape values are going to be pretty extreme. So that's just indicative. That's why we have that hatched risk in place with these Cape values of 3,000 to 4,000. That's typically about 3 to 4 times the typical thunderstorm. So that's really indicative of these larger updrafts. We're talking cloud tops 50, 55, upwards to 60,000 feet in the atmosphere. That is a lot of room to lift those hailstones further up in the atmosphere, and then once they fall, they could do some damage and whatever they hit in its path. So But at the lower levels, unfortunately, the atmosphere will be rotating. So they do have an area of concern where they have that tornado risk in place where they have about a 5% chance. And these tornado parameters are nothing to sneeze at. I mean, they max out about 15. So this is probably the highest levels that we've seen so far in the past couple of months, really. So we're starting to get into that second season we talked about after the middle of September. This is always typically where you have to watch out for that second season. And this is our first, quote unquote, bigger type severe weather event that we have to be on looking out for later on tonight. I think about, again, 8 o'clock to about 3 o'clock in the morning. So if you live in this bullseye area, definitely be on high alert with all three modes for severe weather. And here's the overall updraft helicity index as well. So that's just indicative where some of the higher cloud tops could be, where the atmosphere could be rotating, where you could be seeing some of these larger hailstones fall out of the sky. So just kind of gives you an idea of what these parameters, what we're looking at. And that's why the Storm Prediction Center upgraded that to that enhanced risk for severe storms later on this evening. But now let's take a look at the drought monitor, right? So there's been some areas that have had some welcome rains as of late, but there's a lot of areas that still need desperately a lot of rainfall. And that one area is California. So it's nice to see that storm system coming into Northern California, bringing those heavier rains to that part of the country. That is definitely a good welcome sight. And with all the monsoonal flow we've seen lately, it's been basically eating away the drought in Arizona. So we're only talking abnormally dry conditions for that area. So that's been a drastic flip. There were some heavier rains in Texas for a good chunk, at least the latter part of August. But the last 2 weeks really hasn't seen much. So they made a major dent in the drought. But now all of a sudden they're starting to creep back and heading back in the wrong direction for them. While much of the two-thirds of the country is really not in that much drought conditions. But over here up into the Northeast, where they did have some of those heavier rains in portions of Connecticut as well as into Rhode Island, that also took a major dent because these areas were in a severe drought mode. So now let's take a look at the overall soil moisture. So I mentioned in Texas, you had some rains, but the last 2 weeks has been bone dry. And so now your soil is dry, right? And so, yeah, it's dry obviously in California. So it's definitely nice to see those rains coming in this afternoon. And I think they last all the way and through tomorrow for California. So you got a 2-day punch there. So, right, I mean, we're talking multiple inches of rain potentially. So we'll go over some of those rainfall totals. But it's still fairly moist down here in parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. But this area actually dries out as well. I'm thinking for the next, 7 to 10 days as well. So, well, let's take a look at the SOI index. This is very concerning because I mentioned we still are in a moderate La Nina, and this plays off the southern jet stream, right? And so whenever you see this number over 8, that's really indicative of a La Nina. But man, it's been rapidly increasing as of late, and we're looking for any type of rainfall in the southern states. That's not happening, folks, with this Southern Oscillation Index. Now, all of a sudden, we're talking upwards to 31 on the daily contribution. So that's going in the wrong direction if you're looking for rainfall, because what that basically does, that just puts the kink in the hose with the southern jet stream. It makes it almost non-existent. So if I show you some of the rainfall totals over the next 7 days, there's nothing, guys. There's not a drop of rain in a good chunk of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. I mean, whenever you see an SOI index really racing northward, or these 31s, these 20s and 31s, that's definitely going to be dry in the southern regions, and that's exactly what you're going to be seeing. So I'm not seeing anything like any rain whatsoever, not just next week, even beyond that. So it could be having an extended dry spell for this part of the country. Well, much of California, right? Look at the graph in the left-hand corner of the screen. Yeah, that's a couple inches of rain, right? All these red shaded areas, 2, 3, almost 4 inches of rain. That's Sacramento. We're talking highs in the 60s. That's crazy talk, depending on where we were this time last week of 110 degrees up there. So yeah, it's a drastic flip. We're talking much cooler conditions and rain on the table for them. And then with the Eastern Pacific still alive and prevalent, that keeps the monsoonal flow alive. So we're still going to be talking about some, again, more rain impacting these areas into Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Utah, going into Colorado. These systems coming across, there's the heavier rains are going to be impacting these areas tonight with that severe storms into Illinois as well as Indiana. Then the heavier storms will be well to the north up here in upstate New York, getting into Vermont and New Hampshire. You still have that stalled front off into Florida, but there it would be the would-be tropical storm Fiona offshore. But let's take a look. Let's take a look at the temperatures, right? Here's the next 7 days. So you got that system coming on off the west coast. That's going to bring much cooler conditions for them. So you're going to be seeing more or less average to below average temperatures for a good chunk of the west, while you're getting flashbacks from summer into parts of the south central states. That's exactly what's going to happen with this dominant ridge going to be building over that area. We're talking 90s, we're talking low 100s in this area. If not, some records will fall in portions of Kansas, into Oklahoma, into Texas, with that southern oscillation index going in the wrong direction if you're looking for rainfall, that's for sure. But a good chunk of the country is going to be well above average. But we do have a trough coming in at the end of the week that's going to bring a pretty good cool down. So in combination of that, for the next 7 days, it's going to be overall average conditions for much of the Northeast. Now, the following week, again, we warm up, guys. I mean, it's plenty warm across the United States for your first week of fall, right? This is the first week of fall, guys. This is plenty warm across the United States. Now, what that's going to do, that's going to help lower some pressures into the Caribbean. So now let's talk about the tropics, right? So here's Tropical Storm Fiona. It's really getting its act together. It's a 70-mile-per-hour formidable tropical storm. It's moving west-northwestward. It's right on the cusp of Puerto Rico right now. In fact, it's going to be causing life-threatening flash flooding, mudslides, landslides. It's a dangerous setup for Puerto Rico because it not only travels just in the south side, so they get all that right front quadrant, but it almost stalls and takes that west-northwest turn and puts it right over the western flank of the island there. And so they get hit hard with this setup. And the Dominican Republic also has hurricane watches going to be impacting parts of the Turks and Caicos. Now it's going to head northward and taking more of a beeline with that trough coming in off the northeast there. That's going to be setting the stage for a potential possibly major hurricane right near Bermuda by the time we get into Friday. So we definitely have to be on the lookout for that. But right now, what's concerning is Puerto Rico, because look, this is an eye developing, and the next update from the Hurricane Center should, in fact, upgrade this to a hurricane. This would be a formidable hurricane. It's going to be intensifying to potentially a major hurricane by the time it gets up there to Bermuda. But right now, St. Thomas is getting hit hard, St. Croix's getting hit hard, and especially Puerto Rico, with the latest update from the National Weather Service, is definitely very concerning, of 8 to 12 inches widespread, folks. And on the southern flank, we're talking 15 to 20 inches. On top of the storm surge, 15 to 20 inches, high winds. That's not a pretty scenario, guys. Unfortunately, that's going to cause life-threatening flash flooding. So definitely say your prayers for a good chunk of Puerto Rico tonight and tomorrow, with this storm going to be really impacting that area hard. But what happens after Fiona? So this is the satellite by Friday, right? So notice Fiona really getting its act together, becoming a hurricane by then. And what it does is it just pulls all that moisture around with it, right? It's going to be a powerful system. So it's going to pull all that energy with it, with all the drier air in its wake. But what that does is that actually kind of clears the runway, right? So you already see this little tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa here. So by the time we get into, say, around the 27th of the month, that tropical system will be coming up. Fiona will be gone, nothing left to steal some of that moisture. Now that's going to put it a little bit further south, right? So now we're talking places in the Western Caribbean are going to have to be on the lookout for possibly Gaston going to be in the future as we head towards the end of the month. So places like Jamaica, going into the Cayman Islands, having it going into the Yucatan Peninsula, pretty much the Western Caribbean is going to be on high alert because, again, I showed you the temperature of the United States. You're going to be plenty warm, not next week, but the following week. And so what that does is that's going to help lower the pressures underneath. And when it does that, that's going to have thunderstorms starting to develop, and they're going to start to congeal together. So once they start to congeal together, that's when we have a combination with some of those lower pressures. We could be looking at another potential tropical type system coming to fruition. And if it does, it would be Tropical Storm Gaston by then, because if you look at some of these sea pressure anomalies here, they're really starting to lower in the Western Caribbean by the time we head towards the end of the month. And especially we're seeing numerous areas of lowering pressures out here in the Western Caribbean, heading towards portions of the Yucatan and even into the Gulf of Mexico. So this will be our next area to watch once Fiona gets out of the way. That'll allow Gaston to sneak in underneath and potentially be a problem as we head towards the end of the month. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and catch the latest update while I protect you before and after the storm.